Good afternoon and welcome to those of you in the room and online to the session. What does AI mean for talent management? For those of you that don't know, I'm Abigail Barclay and I'm the Managing Director of Inspired Search, Inspired's Executive Search Division, and I'll be chairing this discussion. AI seems to be in every conversation at conferences and otherwise. But for the next 40 minutes or so, we'll be focusing on its impact on our community's biggest asset, our people. So what impact is AI already having on the workforce? What are some of the largest opportunities that it presents and how can we seize them? And how can we make ourselves ready for its future and hopefully vice versa? I brought together three wonderful experts for you today to learn from, and it is my pleasure to introduce them. This will be a panel discussion and we can have time for questions from the audience afterwards, so please do submit your questions via the app. So we have Timo Hannay, a familiar face to some of you. He's the founder of School Dash, an education data analytics firm and a non-executive director at Sage Publishing. Timo was previously the founding MD of Digital Science and before that ran the online business of Nature Publishing Group. He also convened the 2023 London AI in Education Summit. Frida Ru is an AI and foresight specialist, formerly at Google Mexico. She more recently founded the AI, the New Sexy podcast, addressing AI's impact across industries. As a freelancer, she teaches workshops on AI, machine learning, innovation and Python, impacting over 5,000 women since 2018. And Dr. Zara Nano MBE is the leader behind a few companies making the world of work fair, one of which was sold to our friends at RELX. More recently, she's founded WorkView, and by democratizing pay data, enhancing skills transparency, and providing labour market intelligence, Zara and WorkView shift the skills narratives to employees, offering AI-powered insights to close pay gaps, align wages with skills and labour market trends. What an opportunity for us to learn. So as I said, AI seems to be in all of our conversations, and we're all talking about it. But are we all talking about the same thing? So just to start things off, I just want to set the scene by asking all of the panelists, in a few words, what does the term AI mean to you? And in brief, because I'm sure there's a book in there somewhere, with that definition in mind, how have you seen it impact workplaces already? So Timo, should we start with you and come forward?
Yeah, thank you. So I think in a way it's easier to explain what AI is not, or what it's not just, right? So I think a lot of us, when we talk about AI, we think about ChatGPT, because that's what everyone's excited about at the moment, and other LLMs. They certainly are a form of AI, but LLMs are not the only form of generative AI. Generative AI is not the only use of machine learning, and machine learning is not the only form of AI. So there's lots of, it's a much bigger universe than what we sometimes talk about, which tend to be limited to chatbots and LLMs. And to my mind, most useful applications tend to incorporate elements of all of these things. So they include good old-fashioned rules-based AI, which is sort of traditional software, if you like, as well as some of these machine learning approaches such as LLMs. I think it's also I also want to say one other really quick thing is, it's also not magic, which some of the people working on it would have you believe, right? It's not magic and incomprehensible. We can understand it, and we shouldn't be fooled into thinking that that's impossible.
Very great question. And I actually have two answers to that. One very direct, and I thought I'll just exemplify AI as I understand it through the work that I previously did. As the founder of Gap Square, we developed software to help large companies understand the gender pay gap within their organizations. So we looked at data from HR and payroll and augmented that data to be able to identify gaps, and if those gaps are justified, and if not, what data-driven approaches could lead to closing those gaps. So we used artificial intelligence to start to understand that data better, especially when it came to aggregate data, where we had a lot of data across different industries, and we could start to identify patterns and really interesting insights. And then the second thing that I wanted to bring to this question is, every time I hear AI, it takes me back to this Brené Brown podcast that I listened to this summer on Dare to Lead, and she talks about AI as artificial intimacy, as in the tech world and the interactions that we have through like social media and all of the engagements through tech are leading to us as human beings having more artificial intimacy between each other. And we have hundreds of friends on Facebook and LinkedIn and everywhere else, and no one to actually come and feed our cat when we go away on holiday. So it's, I thought it's a relevant term to bring into this conversation as we will explore a lot of opportunities that come with AI through the next half an hour, but also it's important to understand the impact that it actually has on us as people.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I like to say a more general definition because maybe it's something more technical for me, and I'd like to explain this in this way. It's the capability of the algorithms to replicate cognitive processes. What kind of processes? Brain processes such as understanding language, understanding entities, the ability to recognize images. So it's not just about text, it's not about just images. It goes in many aspects. So as Timothy said, we can find artificial intelligence in many topics, not just ChatGPT. And talking about workforce, it's an opportunity to increase our productivity. Because if we use these tools to, for example, summarization, or maybe to understand in a better way some topics, we can do a lot of stuff that I'm going to talk later.
Wonderful. And you've touched on the kind of the gender pay gap there, Zara, so let's just come to that and the idea. What's the role of AI in building a more diverse workforce? And perhaps what are some of the pitfalls we should be aware of as well?
Yeah. So I started Gap Square in 2015 when I saw a report from the World Economic Forum that was saying we are 217 years away from achieving parity between men and women. At the same time, a different World Economic Forum report was saying that by 2030, most of us will be in self-driving cars. NASA was releasing press releases telling us by 2030, we'll be sending people off to Mars. So I was there thinking, we're sending people off to Mars, we're in our self-driving cars in 2030, driving happily, well, not driving happily on the roads, still 200 years away from achieving parity between men and women. So I thought, how can we leverage that technology and that innovation that is being used to develop the self-driving cars, send people off to Mars, revolutionize healthcare, transform how we do academic research into something that helps drive gender equality. And that's how I foolishly thought at that time, AI is going to solve it. As human beings, we're so biased, bias is everywhere, but if we start applying AI models to data, that all is going to go away because we're not going to be able to hide from it. The reality was further from this idealistic world of someone who didn't come from a background of engineering and programming. So I've learned pretty quickly that our data has a legacy of hundreds of years of bias in it. So there's no getting away from it. And the algorithms that we develop and the statistical regression models carry that legacy of bias with them as well. So when you start applying, when you take the data and you take the algorithms and you put them together, you just get bias on steroids. So when we were looking at aggregate data across, say, because we had a lot of customers in the legal sector. So if you look at the aggregate data from the legal sector in terms of their all of the employees, different job roles, different pay bands, all of the diverse data about employees, and you start making predictions about what can help close the gap, actually the algorithms, the data is taking it into a different direction, and it's starting to make predictions about how your 40-year-old white male is actually most suited for a senior role and how you should be recruiting more women into support roles because that's what
it knows.
It picks up on. That's what our data is telling. That's what our data is saying. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to change that. There isn't enough people in the world working in tech and in AI who actually have this top of mind. The developments are happening pretty quickly. We're seeing advancements and acceleration across sectors. But when you talk to people, like I was having a conversation with someone yesterday who works in the EU on skills and the future of work. And then I said, are you able to, when they're looking at predictions, and then I asked, is that data, can we look at that data by gender? And they were like, oh, we haven't done that. We just look by occupation. That's not our remit. So you have a lot of things happening, a lot of developments, and still not enough focus on de-biasing and actually bringing different points of view into what we do with that data, and therefore a risk that we continue to carry those biases through.
Thank you. Frida, the role of AI in building a more diverse workforce.
Okay, as you heard at the beginning, I come from Latin America, so we have a huge lack of data related to the region. So I have to be more optimistic about this, because if we think about the data that we already have, it's going to guide us to a more pessimistic way of looking at the artificial intelligence. So I'm thinking about it like a way to create new models, maybe using generative AI to understand what are the new needs in the labor force. Also, I'd like to think about in a more uncommon way, and let's say that we can create these models that help us not to think about our backgrounds, about the education that can create some bias. So we can use that tools to create these algorithms that only focuses on our potential skills. So also another thing that I like about AI is that you can learn new things in a very easily way and in a very personalized way. So we can use this to train our employees. We can use it to create new abilities. So I think the really potential for example, our region, it's in that specific things. We have to improve our processes. We have to create new ways of learning, new ways to train different people from every region, not just the one that we already have. So I think that could be the future of AI, and in a more optimistic way.
Thank you.
Can I comment on that?
Yes,
Well, actually, yeah. So I just feel like as the bloke on the panel here. I should also declare an interest. I have 3 daughters, one of whom's just finished a master's in maths, the other of whom's just started second year undergrad in maths, and the third of whom is probably going to follow in those kinds of footsteps. So I do feel a personal interest in this. And I just want to say, I mean, when I first engaged in computing as a kid back in the 1980s, that was actually when the divide opened up between men and women in computer science and in computing, right? So before that, it was pretty much equal. And then it really opened up at that point. And it seems to be that was because that's when it became a sort of consumer product, and it was marketed, in such a way that appealed to men and boys and didn't appeal to women. And there's some very, I think, worrying early research in terms of adoption and use of AI. So this is not about the data analysis and what's reflected there. This is about people actually embracing and using it. It's not, I have to say, not reflected on this panel, but where men and boys are more likely to adopt it, to play with it, to start using it than women are. And I think what we must really avoid is a recapitulation of what happened in the 1980s onward, right, with computing, that happens in AI. Because we want opportunities for women in making use of these tools, but also I think just think for the world, and speaking as a man, as an inhabitant of the world, these technologies tend to take on the characteristics of the people that build and use them, right? And we want that to reflect all of humanity, including men and women together.
There was a really interesting article in The Economist last week of a Danish study, I think, that looked at the gender gap in usage of AI. You may have seen it, and there's the on the one layer, women not maybe feeling confident enough or not feeling they've got the skills enough, but also another layer of they found that particularly high-achieving women not wanting to use it because they feel like it challenges their value of being virtuous and honest and integrity, and they feel like it's cheating. And so I think it's something that we were talking about before. I think there's a, as you say, not kind of repeating history there and allowing or showing the benefits of using it and encouraging and championing the experimentation with it as well. And it's not cheating, but it's really, it's really empowering as well if done healthily and done well.
I would like to add something else. I love the way you say about AI that it's another form of intimacy. Because as you said, yeah, for women are a little bit harder to introduce to AI because we think that it's about programming and it's about computers, and maybe if we think in a more general way, we are not so good at it because in the past we haven't learned about computers or about technology at all. So when we have this approach to the technology, it's a new way to understand what we are doing. It's not just about programming, it's about talking. For example, when we have teach some workshops with women, they are better at talking to the AI than men, you know, because we are more used to talk and we are more used to describe the things that we want. So I don't want to be like
too stereotypical.
Yeah, stereotypical. But in this way, it's a very great way to understand this intimacy. Thank you. Intimacy, and yeah, we feel less afraid to interact with these models when we are thinking about talking with a computer that is not going to judge you.
Fascinating, thank you. Timo, let's think about publishers specifically because of the audience that we've got today. What adaptations to the staff experience do you think publishers here should prioritise in the next 12 months for a more successful future?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that could be said about this, but let me try and distill it down a little bit. I mean, so one, I think, you know, we're just at the early stages of, you know, the emergence and adoption of this sort of latest wave of AI. I'm really reminded, you know, I'm old enough, I started in academic publishing in the sort of mid to late 90s at Nature, and this was just when we were moving full text online, and it was very clear that it was much more than taking a journal and sticking it on a website, right? This was changing the nature of people's interaction with the content itself. There were lots of affordances, interactivity, data sets, so forth, and also the existence of, you know, pervasive internet and digital technologies changed the nature of research that we were reflecting in what we published. And I think we're going through a similar wave now, but we're at a very early stage. Once again, we're at a very early stage. So I think there needs to be an emphasis on sort of open-mindedness and experimentation and flexibility, right? So, you know, in a sense, like with AIs, there's another party involved, right? We've got the sort of the human participants in the process, but now there's another participant that has certain human-like characteristics, but clearly isn't human, and we need to think about how to incorporate them. You know, how do you give them directions? How do you make the most of their skills and minimize their sort of shortcomings? And that's you know, unlike, say, with human beings, that's a moving goalpost, right? In other words, you know, the technology is evolving all the time. Our use of it and our understanding of how to get the most of it is changing all the time. So I think there's a huge, to my mind, particularly in this phase, over the next few years at least, and perhaps beyond that, there's a huge there's a huge emphasis on open-mindedness, experimentation, sharing what works, and just, you know, trying to work this out. I think that makes it more exciting, not less exciting, but there is a great deal of uncertainty and perhaps nervousness as a result. The other thing I guess I just wanted to say in terms of broad brush is, and I think this came out, the earlier session we were hearing about updates from the industry, I think it came out a little bit in that there are both, you know, clearly risks and upsides. You know, if you talk about, so, you know, research integrity, what's the impact of artificial intelligence on research integrity? And the honest answer is we don't know, because this is still to play out, right? And it clearly has some, and it's showing already that there's some reasons to fear, because it can be used to generate fake research, and it can be used to shortcut processes where we want humans to actually get involved and think about things and take responsibility. On the other hand, it can really help us detect those problems and help us be much, much more productive and help research itself. You know, incredibly exciting stuff going on with early developments in sort of AI scientists and stuff, right? And generating research hypotheses using AI that can make us enormously more productive. So I think there's everything to play for. And I think, so as well as being flexible, I think we need to have attention at that very high level and understand what both the risks and the upsides are, and really try and emphasize the latter as far as possible.
Can I add a little bit here? Because both Frida and Timo have mentioned the word productive and productivity, and I think it's really important to unpick it a little bit. We've done a bit of research this summer with content creators, so not for the academic space, just content creators who work for large marketing departments with the purpose of attracting people to certain products and services. And the word productivity and use of AI came up a lot, in that expectations from managers are that a lot of content can be created right now. So the content creators are expected to churn out a lot of stuff because it's easier now. You just go and develop a lot of content. But that is happening in the sense that, what am I trying to say here? Productivity is viewed in this sense as more. Let's use AI to do more, to develop more, to put out more. Whereas I think in the age of AI, productivity should mean quality rather than quantity. because that shifts the narrative completely. And that person who can use AI to, say, develop more content and be faster at developing that content actually should get that time back to spend thinking about, how to develop better content, how to do, better engagements with other people in relation to their content. Whereas what's actually happening is they use AI to develop a quick piece of content, great, move on to the next. So that kind of productivity currently, in my view, doesn't sit well with how generative AI in particular is used in the workplace, and we really need to redefine it before we start moving into this high volume world that doesn't really help us create quality.
And I just wanted to add to that really quickly, if I may, which is, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, there's this sort of joke going around, which is, like half of the people use LLMs to turn 3 bullet points into an essay, and the other half use them to turn essays into 3 bullet points, right? And you sort of have to take a step back, and you sort of like, maybe it feels more productive because I can do an essay really quickly, and now I can also, I can comprehend an essay without having to read it all. But is that really progress, right? To your point. And I think, there's this science fiction author, Joanna Maciejewska, I think her name is, who has also this wonderful observation that I think reflects, like, we have to really decide what we want these technologies to do, right? And she says, I don't want, I want AI to do my dishes and laundry, right, so that I can make art and writing. I don't want it to do art and writing so that I can do my dishes and laundry, right? And so there has to be a sense of, like, who's in charge here, right? We've got agency, like, who gets to decide what these things do and who gets to decide what's genuinely productive and valuable? And we mustn't lose sight of that. So I really...
But I think this also comes back to the fact that a lot of the people who develop AI are, middle-aged Californian guys in their Patagonia vests who actually don't do laundry often, who don't do the cooking in the house, who don't take care of the children, and therefore that does not land on their desk as something that they should focus on, and instead they focus on something different.
Get them to do the dishes.
Yeah.
I think we should stick with this point a little bit. This kind of not men in Patagonia investing dishes, but we can talk about that later. But this kind of the perception that managers have of what AI can do. And I know, Frida, you run workshops for kind of in-place workshops, in-house workshops for staff. Thinking about the audience today, and lots of people here manage teams. What do you think they should be going to encourage their teams to learn first? What should teams be going and now go away and learn how to do with AI first and foremost? If they imagine they don't know anything.
Okay, yeah, well, first of all, as Sarah said at the beginning, we have to be clear that AI is not going to solve all our problems. So it's a tool, like is Excel, like is another tools that we already have. But, we have to think about the limitations that AI already have. The limitations about, it's not just about creating a lot of content, and So thinking about that, in companies we can use AI to personalize the career paths that our employees have. So if you want to create a better employees, we have to create their own paths. We have to think about what are the things that they are lacking and what are the things that they made mistakes on. So we have to start thinking more about people and less about technology. So this is that's the reason, because there's not a solution for all the companies, and it's not like a magical solution for everyone. So we have to address what are the problems that the companies have, so we can decide what technology we are going to use. So this is very controversial, because some people came to me saying like, okay, I want to implement AI. And it's like, okay, but for what? What do you want to solve with this? It's like, I don't know, but I just want to use AI. It's okay, we have to take a step back and understand what are the real problems. So then we can think about technology more than just AI. So this is very interesting, because we have to think about also technology literacy, about what are the ethical and responsible use of the technology, instead just thinking a specific tool.
Absolutely. I think, Zara, you probably got some comments on this as well. If you think about, I think it can be really hard to know where to start when you're training, especially with something like AI, where like you're saying, you want your staff to do better, or you feel like, gosh, your staff should be experimenting with it more, implementing it more, but because you don't know yet what AI can do, which we've all kind of agreed on, it's really hard you don't have those set goalposts, so it's really hard to reverse engineer a training course to put your staff on to meet those needs. So how might a company go about knowing where to start with training their staff?
Yeah, and I think that's a common thread all around
feeling
the
like
world.
that's okay.
I was on a workshop yesterday with a US company that does research around skills, and data is showing 90% of employees feel like they need some kind of new skills, and about 50% of employers have no idea what to do about skills and how they move this agenda forward in light of AI and automation. So it's quite a big challenge. We are also not helped by the data that we have, because if you look oftentimes in companies' taxonomies around skills, or taxonomies around skills that are created around tech and the future of work, a lot of the times some of the skills aren't even skills, they're tasks. So people confuse skills with tasks, and then there's overall, the landscape is challenging. But what we're definitely seeing in terms of the rising requirements for skills is the more what we would call soft skills. They're definitely going on the increase, and if anything, a lot of companies could be spending, in their first instance, a lot of time working with the people on developing those kind of skills, the leadership skills, the empathy skills, the communication skills, collaboration, everything that is needed, to your point, for the human-to-human interaction, because ultimately it is about the people, and then it's about the technology.
Yeah, and sorry,
No, please.
one thing that I would like to add, it's that also we have to learn about critical thinking, because we are creating a lot of content, we are creating a lot of tools, but we are not focusing on what are the outputs that these tools create. So we have to focus about how we make decisions, what are the outputs that we are expecting, what are the problems that we want to solve, instead of just running a lot of strategies and all of this. So this is something that we need to focus about soft skills, about understanding businesses, understanding people, and not just learning to programming and all these things that we sometimes think that our people need to do.
We'll help AI take us where we want to go, rather than getting too caught up in where we think it's going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to echo that. So you mentioned last year I convened the AI in Education Summit in London. One of the outcomes of that actually is an initiative that I'm leading now with some universities to look at how can we teach new types of skills and perspectives, but use the technology to do that. So how can we use technology? How can we use AI, LLMs and other types of technologies? And we're working precisely on this, actually. In fact, we begin work in earnest tomorrow on a critical thinking module. And so I was interested to hear Frida mention critical thinking. How can you teach critical thinking to undergraduates, for example, and to anyone, frankly, but in our particular case, undergraduates are the target audience. But how can you use the technology to do that, right? There's all kinds of amazing affordances, right? You could imagine doing it through Socratic dialogues, for example, with an appropriately trained chatbot, right? There are many ways in which we can do it more effectively than we could with a lecture and a textbook, and we need to explore those. So there's both the need, if you like, to impart new skills and new perspectives, but there's also the possibility of using the technology precisely to enable that. And this is exactly the initiative we're working on now. It's not a public initiative yet, but if anyone's interested in it, please follow up with me and I'm happy to explain more.
Thank you so much. Just before we go to the Q&A, what would you say, using your expertise, your knowledge, your experience, what would you say to someone in scholarly publishing or otherwise that was feeling fearful about the implications that AI may pose on job security?
Okay, so I will say that we have to think AI as a tool, as a collaborative tool, and not a threat. And let's say something that we are very familiar. When cars were first introduced to the market, we weren't afraid of that. We wanted to use it to get faster to different places. So AI is the same. You have to not to be afraid of using it. You have to get into it. You have to decide where do you want to go with this new tool. And yeah, I think that's the main thing. Where do you want to go? Instead of what? It's where, how. So I think that would be the first step of everything, not just about AI. So let's not be afraid of this new technology. We are not competing against tech. We are collaborating with these new tools. So it's like another way to see this, like augmenting our capabilities. So use it as if it was your training tool instead of like a threat.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, if anyone likes comedy and knows about Jon Stewart, who's like a brilliant American comedian, he has a brilliant sketch about AI and the future of work. I watch it sometimes like every month to remind myself of his excitement at us all getting assistance. But that's not necessarily what's happening. I just want to make a comment about the future and what the future holds, more related to the way women use AI, because data is showing that less women use AI. Women in legal space use AI less than, for instance, their male colleagues. And this reminds me always about the bicycle face. Bicycle face was a medical condition attributed to women who tried to ride the bike when the bike was invented. And it was recorded in academic journals, academic medical journals. It was spoken as a condition that is bicycle face and it's harmful to the woman and a woman's health, and it leads to anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, and all sorts of things, and therefore women should not ride bikes. So to a point of misinformation, academic journals sometimes published misinformation even like hundreds of years ago. They still did, because it's obviously not true. But it was used, that entire narrative was used as a way to prevent women from getting on the bike. Because if women got on the bike, they could go wherever they wanted, and they didn't need anyone's help to go anywhere.
They weren't doing the dishes
anymore.
at home.
So, yeah. So I think it's just, to me, this kind of the narrative that is being spread around women not using AI, it sometimes reminds me of the bicycle face, and it's actually not a thing, and we should be embracing it and using it to Frida's point, as long as it makes sense for what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, to people who are interested, stroke afraid, whatever you feel about it, get stuck in, start using it. I use it as a coding partner for writing programming code. I use it as a writing coach. I use it as a tutor to help me understand the maths that my kids study that I don't understand. You know, I now use it in School Dash. We use it for all kinds of data analysis that we couldn't possibly have done before. So it has amazing, you know, possibilities. And the point is to get stuck in, because it's everything to play for, right? Nobody knows how this is going to pan out. And if you get stuck in, you can have a say in it, right? You can actually affect the future and how these things pan out. And if you don't, other people will decide, right? So get stuck in, use it, have fun, and help shape the future. I think, you know, there's everything to play for still.
Brilliant, thank you. While Godwin's has a look at the questions that we're getting through from the audience, can you please join me in bringing your hands together for our lovely panel? Does anybody in the audience have a question? Shall I have Godwin? Mark.
Hi, Mark Carden from Mosaic Search. Going back to talent management, I mean, one aspect of that is recruitment, which Abigail, you and I both are involved in. And I wonder whether you or the panelists had some thoughts on the use of AI in recruitment, apart from, as Zara's already pointed out, as a system for populating your organisation with old white geezers based on the data set. So, but what are other aspects of how AI could work or be a danger in recruitment?
Can I just quickly mention someone here? There's this amazing woman, she's a journalist in New York, and she teaches at NYU, Hilke Schillman. She recently published a book called The Algorithm, Who Decides Who Gets Hired, Who Gets Fired, and Gets Promoted at Work, and Why We Should Be Worried About It. And she has spent a few years exploring all of the AI-based platforms that are out there, helping people recruit your top talent, and actually uncovered a lot of black boxing and a lot of algorithms that actually are unsuitable and will not find you the right candidate. So there's definitely the kind of what the tech sector is saying, we're finding tech solutions to recruit people, but the reality isn't that shiny, because a lot of them are biased. A lot of them have no science behind how they identify the best fit. And yeah, they need to have a careful consideration into. Sorry, I just read Hilke's book and was like really blown away by what's happening in the sector.
I think it's not something to be relied on because of the the biases that that you've mentioned. You can't rely on
Or maybe
it.
take it just like a consideration, not like the final decision as everything else. And when you use AI, always doubt about the output. Always think that it's just like an opinion, it's just another source of information, but not the final output, please.
Just to add to that, I mean, I can't, we've got Abigail on the stage, and I definitely can't better her in terms of talking about recruitment and HR and so forth. But I think, as a general point, I think one of the key things is we shouldn't, I mean, we can in principle, but we shouldn't be using these systems as a way of, washing our hands of responsibility, right? So because the algorithm says this and it's a black box and we can't understand it. So I think it's super important for human beings to take responsibility. I think one of the things that machines can't do, as a matter of principle in my view, is take responsibility. My father used to be an airline pilot, right? At least 95% of the flying was done by the onboard computers, but he took responsibility from getting to A to B safely and getting all the passengers there, right? So it's not, automation and use of computers to assist with these things is not incompatible with the idea of human responsibility. And I think whenever we're talking about really consequential decisions, such as hiring decisions, it's really important to consider that. A person needs to be ultimately responsible for them.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Collier. I'm from bookcareers.com. I'm a career coach. Also support Redwood Publishing recruitment. Yesterday we were given a very alarming stat that the software found 22 million students used AI to write their papers, and 20% used more than 80% AI. And I wondered, because I'm starting to see, and I know from some of my recruitment industry colleagues, are starting to see an increase in the number of people that are using AI to write their CVs, covering letters, and any tasks that may be set as part of the interview process. And I just wondered, because everything I've been taught is to avoid AI, to do those kind of things because of how AI is working. But I wondered, whilst we're talking about encouraging using AI, what things could be done to stop and discourage people from doing it as part of their own personal job application process?
Anyone want to?
I'll have a brief answer to that. I think the book that I mentioned by Hilke mentions a lot of platforms that are using kind of recruitment and tech for recruitment. And the reason all of that tech has happened is because there's a massive gap right now. In terms of recruiting people, we've moved in our jobs so much in that when I was in my 20s, which was a long time ago, I didn't even, digital marketing wasn't a thing. That was not a job that someone would have ever had. So jobs appear and they change so much, and yet we're still using a CV to help identify someone's experience. So there's a gap in the market that AI is trying to fill, in that the CVs might not necessarily be the best tool to recruit. So I think that's what we have to figure out, is maybe some of those technologies aren't the best, but what is, so that we
and
don't
what process
have
is the best to identify the right talent for the right roles. I think we'll see a real evolution in the recruitment process from the hiring side as well, to be perhaps more skills based and to accommodate for, as you say, to not just rely on a CV and a cover letter, but to do it in other ways. Frida?
Yeah, I think we have the same problem in education. Teachers yell at me and it's like, Frida, you are encouraging my students to use AI and I don't want them to use it. And it's like, okay, but what are the things that you are evaluating? You are evaluating just summarization? I don't think that should be the abilities that we have to measure nowadays. Maybe if we think like 20 or 30 years ago, it's okay, but not now. So we have to rethink about our processes, our recruitment processes, and what are the things that we really need from the people? Do we need like to write a letter? This is the things or the task that they are going to do at their jobs. Okay, so it's not good to use AI, maybe. But what are the things that you are really evaluating in your candidate? So we have to rethink about our processor, we have to think or rethink about our education. So yeah, now there's a huge gap, and we have to close that gap in like many steps. The first step, let's say, it's to have the common ground for people using AI and companies using AI, and then maybe we are going to remove this layer of technology, and then we'll start talking about people and talking about the abilities that they have, and not just writing a letter or writing a resume.
Thank you. Godwins, I think you have a question.
I'm not supposed to ask a question, but I will ask one.
Rebel.
Yeah, thank you, panel, for addressing the gender aspect, the gender disparity in this discussion. What I wanted to ask you specifically is other types of disparities, socioeconomic, disability, neurodivergent, that exist. How does AI impact this, especially in talent management? We know that people would be recruited based on ability mostly, and sometimes interviews doesn't take into consideration that someone may have a different ability in learning. So how do we use, or how does AI support or help this? And are these people who fall under all of these other categories being taken into consideration when developing AI? Thank you.
I can make it. So I sort of feel like, as a white middle-class, middle-aged dude, I feel like I'm kind of like ill-equipped to comment on this. But I'll just say, although my kids have mixed ethnicity, and the project that I just mentioned, the higher education project I just mentioned, among the things I'm most excited about is we're working with a technologist called Chris Mayers, who's a member at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, but he's blind, and he's helping us think through about how to make sure that whatever we create is accessible to people who have those kinds of disabilities. In a way, I'm going to contradict what I said before, which is that human beings need to take responsibility for decisions. But these kinds of technologies and approaches have the potential to help us transcend our implicit or indeed our explicit biases, but particularly our implicit biases. So I don't have an easy answer to your question, unfortunately, but I think with the right attitudes and with the right participation, I think, again, this is an opportunity to make things much better. They could get worse, there's no question about it. That's why this is such a consequential time. But I think by making sure we're intentional about these things and by including the right people in the development of these systems, I think we can make things much, much better than they've been.
No, I think technology hasn't necessarily got it right. I've been working in the diversity and inclusion space for over 10 years, and diversity and inclusion is still an afterthought with a lot of the things that we do. It's still something that runs in parallel with the business or in parallel with a policy, and is kind of brought in when it's necessary to say that we've ticked the box and we've done diversity and inclusion. So things are going to change when we're going to start bringing a lot of the diversity and inclusion indicators into our business models, into our operation models. That's when we start measuring and tracking the right indicators, and it's not just an afterthought. I'm quite curious to see how the situation evolves, for instance, in the US when it comes to race and ethnicity. Currently, kind of things seem to be going forward, but going backwards. But equally, 2045 is the year when the US becomes a country with a majority black population, like ethnic minority, different, non-white. Let's put it that way. 2045 is the first year when the US becomes white minority populated. So I'm very interested to see in the run-up to that how technology evolves and develops with that inclusion in mind.
Finally, I would like to say that there are a lot of opportunities for inclusion because AI gives you the superpower of have personalization. So you can see maybe specific things that you cannot see before. For example, for me, I'm very sensible to high or louder noises. So I always carry with me my noise cancelling earphones. So this is very good because there are specific things that are now enabling us to to face new challenges, or maybe to speak in public, for example. As they were saying, when you have these interviews, maybe there are people that are not able to talk like very easily like others. So what are the specific things that you want to do, and how AI could help you to do that? For example, for me, it's very easy to talk in public, but when it's about recording a video, I freeze. It's like, so I have trained my own AI that helps me to create an avatar to talk instead of me. So that's the kind of stuff that I can do with AI. So yeah, there are a lot of opportunities in that field.
We could talk for hours on this, and like I said, there is a book in there somewhere, but we are already over time, I think. So.
According to the app, we have 10 minutes.
No. Like minus 10 minutes, I think.
Okay.
So we will wrap up there. Thank you so much to the panel for enlightening us about the future, and also reminding us that some of those things that have always been the case are constant. The need for experimentation and creativity, and willingness to be outside of our comfort zones for a bit. Thank you to ALPS for being a platform for this really important people-focused discussion, and for the coffee that is out there waiting for you. There will now be a 20-minute coffee break before the next session, which will be back in Deansgate 1 and 2 on licensing developments. Please join me one more time to thank our panel.